Good morning, everybody. Yesterday, after I prepared the forecast briefing and recorded it, I had yet to see a lot of the news headlines about the fires in Hawaii, so that's why I didn't include it yesterday. But throughout the day, I was watching just numerous reports of how terrible these fires were in parts of Hawaii. And I just want to explain to you a little bit about what was going on in the meteorology in case you hadn't seen it yet. So this was Dora. I was focusing a lot on Dora and its eventual crossing of the international date line. But to the north of it, we have a typical Pacific subtropical high, which was sitting here. But the contrast in the pressure between this very large high pressure cell here and the low pressure in parts of Dora just created a strong pressure gradient between the two. And the resulting flow here just really increased the winds out of the east across Hawaii, which means they come downslope over the top of the peaks onto the western sides of each of these islands. And as a result, we saw extremely large fires that broke out. And of course, you've seen in the news, I'm sure, the devastation that's happened. I want to show you some satellite data. And just before I go any further with this is not smoke. What you're seeing here is not smoke. This is just EOS Terra, this satellite, an instrument called MODIS on board of the satellite platform called Aqua. Forgive me for stuttering through that. But what you're looking at here is the island that we were talking about that had the fires on here. So what I want to do is I want to show you a thing that we can do with our satellites using all of the different bands. I can flip over to a thermal band and show you where the satellite was picking up on the fires that were ongoing. But we did capture with some of our geostationary satellites the smoke plume from those devastating fires. And you can see here using Colorado State's website where they posted a great video just to show what that looked like. So devastating day the other day in this part of the world, and I apologize for missing it. I just hadn't yet seen the news headlines of what was going on there. Now, I was paying attention a lot to the storms that were coming across the midsection of the country. So if I take you back to yesterday, remember we had that kind of two-pronged shortwave that was coming through this area, delivering kind of a setup for an early morning round of storms and then a late night round of storms. And you can see them blowing up late in the day here in this particular area, but hitting Missouri, southern Missouri, getting northern Arkansas. And we'll take a look in a few moments at those storm reports. But I want to show you on the northern side of some of the smoke that's getting pulled on the backside. And also we've been watching some of these larger wildfires out in parts of the west. We can see one here in Oregon. The one that was in Utah is kind of obscured here by some cloud cover. But the pattern is going to continue to look much like this, with deeper troughs rolling through the northern tier of the United States for the next 7 or 8 days before it begins to really kind of shift around. Now, on radar, this is what it looked like. So we just play back the last 12 hours or so. You can see the second round of storms coming out of Missouri, hitting Arkansas with some very heavy rain. See the storms training over this area at the end of the animation. We got some heavy rain through parts of Tennessee and Kentucky and also through parts of Illinois, but watch right in through here. Some flooding right in through this particular area. Again, that's not to ignore storms elsewhere around the country, but we just go back here and have a quick look at this. Let's go to the Storm Prediction Center site, go to Storm Reports. There we can kind of see the main band of the wind reports. Had 100 reports of severe weather the other day. Most of them concentrated right in through here. When stitching it all together and just asking how much more rain was added, this is the last 24 hours of total accumulated precipitation. In fact, I should have a 6 a.m. update. There it is. So we can see a couple of the heavier bands, the one to the north and then the one to the south here, delivering a lot of rainfall. And where I think this is all just becoming critical to kind of observe and monitor is how things have really shaped up over the last 30 days. Now, we can see, again, Texas, Louisiana, extremely dry. This pocket of North Carolina, which I do have better news for this area in terms of rainfall coming up, has been quite dry. Sections of Iowa getting into Minnesota and kind of opening up here, getting into parts of the Canadian prairies we talked about earlier this week, very dry. And even though there are storms still coming into the southwest, we have yet to see the full-blown nature of a southwestern monsoon. This upcoming pattern shift, though, might take the ridge and pull it back over into this area about 10 days from now. And if that were to occur and that ridge opens up more toward the mid-south, we will begin to get a better sense of a southwestern monsoon just because of the placement of that ridge. But other than that, you can see these large dry areas in parts of the Pacific Northwest and California as well. Now, we did finally get back online, I think it was 2 days ago it came back online, but the NASA lists soil moisture data that I'd love to show you. So this is the soil moisture percentile, and we're down to from 0 to 40 centimeters, so we're going down 16 inches. And what it's showing us here is just, again, those troubled areas here, as we talked about, stretching into North Dakota and the Canadian prairie. you can see there are a few narrow bands in between the very heavy rains that have come through lately that still need more moisture. That spot in North Carolina that we talked about. Interestingly enough, given how much rain has fallen in parts of Nebraska, we still see down there at 16 inches some deficits, and I'm sure there's a lot of growers that can confirm these data. Now, I just want to remind you that these are modeled results, and so as a result, this is not a perfect product, but it gives us an idea. It gives us a good view of what we think that soil moisture looks like, because it is the most poorly measured variable that we need to have in agriculture. We just don't have enough soil moisture probes around that are all linked up to give us that information. But I appreciate what NASA does here, and I'm glad they got their servers fixed. From here, I want to show you another spot of the world, because I think this is influencing the pattern. So I'm going to take you to Twitter feed. I'm going to go back to Colorado State. We're going to go to the Sierra. This is their public feed, so I can show it to you here. And this is it's kind of a stitching together of a series of satellite images that they took way up in the Arctic. So you are, on the North Pole here. And I know it's an odd view because of how the satellites cover this particular area, but using the NOAA 20, the VERS instrument, we can see this deep low that's been orbiting here for the last couple of days. All right, that's making me a little dizzy, so I'm going to back off of it. I want to show it to you like this. This is where it currently sits right now. So what you saw over there was the Canadian archipelago. You saw Siberia. You saw up here, places like Svalbard, and there's the low. And why I'm curious about this is because my narrative for the last 10 days has been, as long as this is maintained, this deep low here, the flow is coming around and rolling across the U.S.-Canada border and diving in this direction, right? That's been the story. So what that has done is it's suppressed the ridging to the south. It's kept the south very, very hot. We tend to have some split flow across the west, which means it's been very dry in California. And we knew that if we're going to assess a change in the pattern, it was going to have to come from a change probably upstream, and that upstream change was going to be over the Bering Sea or over Alaska. So this is it. This is what the result of having that low has done. Can you kind of see the troughs? They're just each one sweeping through here, and as they sweep through, they initialize the chance for heavy rain and for severe weather. But again, it's all about their trajectory, coming in like this versus coming in like this, which is what we typically get in winter, for example. So as I play this forward through the end of this week, we're going to talk about these multiple waves that come through and what they're doing in terms of total precipitation. The models have still got this in place by next Monday. There's kind of a high over low setup. I'm not going to call it a block because it's not around long enough for that. But this is kind of a signal that things are starting to change, because by next Tuesday into Wednesday, see where that low, that's the one we're talking about, starts to press its way over to this side of the Arctic. What that's going to do as it gets over toward the Chukchi Sea, which is here, is it seems to be influencing that trough that's in the Bering Sea. And so what this does is that begins to fade. And the models have been quite consistent with getting rid of it. Now, a few days after that happens, we're going to see the resultant downstream pattern shift as well. So that means by Friday the 18th, we're way out there in the forecast here, we're going to start to watch this deeper trough erode. And the models have shown this now for several runs. And we talked about it the other day by looking at the Pacific North American pattern. But there you go, there's a ridge here, troughing along the west coast, and the ridge that was over Texas begins to open up and move more into the plains, into the Midwest, into the Mid-South. And that's going to increase the temperatures there, and it's also going to give us a drier signal overall. So I wanted just to keep you up to speed on that kind of evolution in the models. It seems to be quite consistent, with this particular look. And the models have been, when I say consistent, this is the run-to-run change. So you notice there's not been much change in this area. It's been it's just been consistent. About the only thing it's done is it's made the ridge here get a little bit bigger, or the heights come up a little bit. Okay, put it all together. Today, we're still dealing with the very active pattern where the troughs are rolling through. So we have storms coming over to parts of the Carolinas. We have storms again igniting here, parts of South Dakota, western Iowa, and Nebraska. Going into tomorrow, we're just going to follow that front. So this is on the 11th, coming through parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa. And then we're going to just see that progress further over to the Ohio River Valley by the time we get into the 12th on Saturday. Now remember, the Storm Prediction Center has been watching the next wave that's coming through. So by day 4, okay, this is their outlook, again, centering right back here on Sunday into Monday into this part of the Midwest. And then day 5, following it again, Monday into Tuesday over toward almost to the Appalachian Mountains here. So there's still multiple waves coming through. Now, I don't want to forget about today, this morning, because we're still watching active storms that have moved over the Blue Ridge Mountains here in the Appalachian Mountain chain. We're still watching the storms training out of parts of Arkansas into northern Mississippi. And so if we just watch the latest update from the high-res NAM, here are those storms this morning. Here's the next frontal boundary coming through. As we just play this on through the rest of the day, we see that there are rain chances coming into those drier spots in Virginia, coming up here to Pennsylvania and back into North Carolina. This is this afternoon. Then there's a second round, possibly this evening, hitting this part of North Carolina. It's not really well resolved here, but there could be some isolated storms late in that area. Then our attention is going to turn to the next front that's coming through as one exits New England. So we see this one. This is 11 p.m. on Thursday, playing through Friday morning. So that's why we're watching this area in the overnight on Thursday. And then that system rolls through. And we get into Friday night. You see the low moving over the Great Lakes states. And then again, Saturday, this is only going to go through Saturday midday, but we'll keep an eye on parts of the Ohio River Valley at that point. Notice, as these start moving through, we start to get some kind of push of some, moisture coming up here into parts of, the desert Southwest, indicating there's still life in this monsoon. It's just not, it's not the super strong one that we can get. So let's take this, which gets us out to midday Saturday, and just open it up to a 7-day forecast from the WPC. I like their maps. I like their representation of where the precipitation is going to be. And overall, what we see here is the culmination of that pattern. Now, take a look at some of the differences. At the end of this 7-day time period, we're starting to see better southwestern monsoonal flow. And you say, well, why is that? Well, we have the troughs coming through in the near term. Okay, there's going to be 3 of them, but then that ridge is going to open up. And so if it opens up into this area and the flow starts going like this, well, that just pulls in the moisture and really helps out the southwestern monsoon and how it's going to flow. So let's go to the European model and just kind of watch it together. So let's get you up to speed. This is this afternoon. As we just play through the rest of the day, I am a little concerned about how this might just jump over this part of the kind of lining up here on the Appalachian Mountains. But could we get some rain into those places that need it? Yes, I think we can. So again, here's the next frontal boundary coming through the northern plains. Okay, this is Friday midday, Friday evening. Then as we play from there into Saturday, this is Saturday afternoon, evening. Again, we're going to watch the Ohio River Valley at that point. We then go into Sunday, and you see this low, watch right here, dive out of the Canadian Prairie, delivering some much needed rain into that area. It comes here into the Western Corn Belt. This is the day 4 we're concerned about, right in through here. This low curls up nice and tight over the 4 corner states, giving us the change over to the threat of strong to severe storms moving farther to the east. And then that slides all the way through parts of New England. Now, it's out here past the 15th, 16th, and 17th that ridge begins to open, and the last of these troughs moves through. We start to see a bit of a shift in the pattern. So until then, most of the rainfall that you see here is coming in the next 7 days. But this is our probability of getting at least an inch of rainfall over the next 10 days. As we normally do, let's go take a look at those drier areas. This is the chance of getting less than half of an inch. But we're beginning to see some change in this, all right? And that change is starting to show up in the week 2 forecast. You see, the CPC yesterday opened up this region of drier conditions. See it kind of opening up like this in the European model. And here it is in the GFS. Now, as that ridge begins to expand, and I think I just have enough model evidence that I think it's going to do that, we will likely see storms run around its edge, okay? And that's why we continue to see from the Intermountain West through parts of the Northern Plains, possibly the Canadian Prairie into the Great Lakes states, better chances of storms. So I'm going to wait until tomorrow to look hard at the new long-range data to see how long this particular pattern sticks around. We still have a lot of things in movement, like what the MJO is doing, which we'll talk about tomorrow, and also what's going on with El Nino. But right now, I think this will be our most important feature to get us toward the end of the month of August. So when did the temperatures respond? Well, I want to show you a couple of things to get you set up for this. This is my latest growing degree day anomaly map, which was started on April 1. Now, some of you are going to look at this and go, you got to be kidding me. How is Oklahoma still showing up, with below normal given the extreme heat? Well, remember, when you calculate a growing degree day, you stop your calculation at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So if it's 106 degrees, you don't use those extra 20 degrees in the calculation. So what you're actually seeing here is the cooler, earlier weather, earlier in the season. Now, Colorado's had a lot of heavy rain, and that's what's doing it here. And all of this over here in parts of the Mid-South, but the Eastern Corn Belt, getting over to the Carolinas, Virginia, this was all from cool weather early in the season as well. So we just don't count anything above 86 Fahrenheit when you do this. We account for that by looking at something called a stress degree day. Now, remember, the stress degree days, the work that was done on this was primarily focused on Iowa and growing corn. So the idea here being that if you got above 140 of these units in a growing season on dryland corn, you tend to have yield loss. So I would tell you that this metric is probably only valid if you are north of that line. You can't use this in Kansas or Oklahoma or Texas to assume what's going to happen to the crop because it is not, the metric isn't designed for that area. I guess that's the way to say it. So do notice though, parts of Missouri, Illinois, big section here of South Dakota have surpassed those numbers. But this is kind of a measure on the degrees above 86 we've accumulated. So just so you see this, look at parts of Central Texas. They've had an extra 1,100 degrees, in some places more than that, over 86 degrees when you add them up throughout the entire season. I hope that makes sense what we're doing here. So just kind of shows you where the heat stress has really been. Okay, the temperatures and the forecast from the National Digital Forecast Database here, starting off like this today, moving into tomorrow on Friday. Heat just stays on underneath that ridge in Texas. Here we are on a Saturday, a more warmer day for a lot of us here across the U.S., still cooler in the southwest, cooler along the northern tier. But then by Sunday, we know we have our next front coming through. There it is by Monday. And we're going to watch temporarily as that high over low block sets up early next week for the heat to come back into the Pacific Northwest to California. But it'll be after this that this ridge that has been over Texas opens up and begins to change the temperature pattern for a lot of people that through next Tuesday continue to see cooler weather. So to show you that, I got to flip over to the ensembles. Now, next 5 days are shown here. And as we move this forward, we're just looking at a 5-day sliding window. We're going to park it out there day 5 through 10. So remember, that's when the high over low block is keeping it warm west. Now, after this, do you see the ridge expanding? As the ridge expands and the heat moves back into the central United States, the west gets that negative P&A, that drop in the heights, that trough, and that's why the warmth comes back to this particular area. So we're going to see if this lasts all the way through the end of the month. We know that there have been times where the models have shown this, and then the reality of it is that it's underpredicted the persistence of cooler air in this area. So we'll wait to see kind of how this opens, but we've now seen multiple model runs all week that have shown this, and I think it seems to be a pretty strong signal. I honestly couldn't tell you the duration of it just yet. Will it last all the way into the beginning of September? We'll have to wait and see here, all right? Other things going on around the world, I want to give you a quick update on the tropics. This is the next 7 days. The problem in the tropics is even though the wind shear is relatively low for most of the tropical Atlantic, and we've also got very, very warm ocean temperatures, we haven't had a lot of triggers, not a lot of African easterly waves as we talked about yesterday. And there's a lot of dust, Saharan dust, that any would-be tropical system has to deal with as it moves across the open Atlantic Ocean. But we do need to keep our eye on the Pacific. We had going into the Korean Peninsula a tropical system here. There's a large one that is south of Japan, and this is Dora over here, as you can see. And if we look at the forecast, this is the forecast for Dora, by the way, coming past the international date line. But I want to keep an eye on this system as it goes over Japan and possibly gets pulled up into the Bering Sea eventually, because it could influence or reinforce a trough of the Bering Sea. And if it did that, then that would actually put a date on the end of the heat that's expanding back into the central United States and east, because that would reinforce the trough that's over the Aleutian Islands and reset us up with a pattern like we just saw. So I think I'll keep an eye on it for you, and I'll keep you up to date on how this is all shaken up. So we'll talk soon. Thank you.